Good morning. Welcome to my presentation. This is Melville Cooke presenting from Kingston, Jamaica. Jamaica's inherent ontology as an island permeates the Ministry of Health and Wellness's audiovisual Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right public service announcement, which was posted to its YouTube channel on May 4th, 2019, and carried extensively on the country's two major free-to-air television stations. The terms public service announcement and public service advertisement are used interchangeably throughout this paper regarding the PSA being analyzed. As a response to the threat which the non-communicable diseases, NCDs, diabetes, and high blood pressure pose to the health of many Jamaicans and the country's economic well-being, in 2016, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, an agency, of course, of the Jamaican government, started the Jamaica Moves campaign, encouraging exercise and healthy diets. The Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA, which is analyzed in this presentation, is a major component of the Jamaica Moves campaign. The PSA opens along the Norman Manley Highway in Kingston. It is still popularly called Palisadoes Road, as it was named up to 1972 for the spit of land which it is sited on, and is one of Jamaica's defining geographic features. Descending gradually as it runs from east to west, distinguishing itself from Jamaica's mainland, the Palisadoes dips southward from Harbour Head to the famed seaside dead-end town of Port Royal. At one point, Port Royal was the home of pirates like Jamaica's lieutenant governor from 1674 to 1675, Sir Henry Morgan, and it was also once Jamaica's capital until the reputed wickedest city on earth was partially sunk by an earthquake in 1692, leaving extensive ruins underwater. The National Works Agency, a government agency, uses built environment landmarks to define the distinctive strip of land. The Palisadoes is a particularly striking visual of Jamaica's islandness, with the open Caribbean Sea to the left, heading towards Port Royal on one side, and the Kingston Harbor, the world's 7th largest natural harbor, on the right. It is the roadway which persons using the Norman Manley International Airport, built in 1938 into 1939, have as an arriving or departing image of Jamaica. More recently, a cruise ship port built close to Port Royal welcomed its first ship, the Marella Discovery II, in January 2020. Erosion of the Palisadoes Peninsula led to the Palisadoes Peninsula Shoreline Protection and Rehabilitation Project, scheduled for April 2010 to October 2011. Run by the China Harbor Engineering Company, it had a budget of US $65 million, which included the project that this initial site. This included the project, included in the project was this initial site of the Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA, as the NWA stated. The approximately 5-kilometer walkway is built along the Kingston Harbor side of the Palisadoes Strip, starting approximately 5 kilometers from the Harborview roundabout. In addition to the intended exercise, it is a popular hangout spot and recurs throughout the Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA. A section of this walkway is utilized for the opening scene of the PSA, which at approximately 3 minutes long and with its music and dancing content is more like a pop music video. The music which the PSA utilizes is dancehall, the most recent phase of Jamaican popular music, which is born from Jamaica's island ontology. Cooke 2018 terms Jamaican Creole as the accustomed language of Jamaican popular music, which Devonish and Jones 2017 trace to the utilization of Jamaican Creole in Jamaican popular music from 1960 to 2011, with Jamaica gaining political independence from Britain in 1962. They note the peak of the combination in the dancehall period. Essentially, the Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA simplifies and shortens Ministry of Health and Wellness policy, translated from standard English to Jamaican Creole, then transmits it to the population at large through the communication medium of Jamaican popular music. This music is rooted in the sound system. The sound system is also related to Jamaica's island nature, collating imports and inputs from abroad, often related to its colonial history, into a unique music product. Therefore, the Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA aims for behavior change in the population of a developing country, an island nation, struggling to achieve indicators of national progress within 60 years of political independence. It uses the long-standing nexus of Jamaican popular music and Jamaican Creole, which originated in the Jamaican population's accustomed music production, performance, and consumption practices, dictated by its island ontology. However, despite widespread use, there are polarizing views about Jamaican Creole among the island's population, a hurdle which Jamaican popular music overcame in the 1970s when Vail, 2007, assesses that there was sufficient acceptance of Jamaican popular music in the country to apply Manuel's definition of a national style. Jamaica's history as a colonized island is also related to the PSA in another way, as Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, attributes the prevalence of hypertension and diabetes in the region to diets established during slavery and colonialism. The Jamaican Ministry of Health and Wellness stated that, quote, many of the interventions required to mitigate the impact of this epidemic lie outside of the health sector and will need a whole of society response. The Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA meets this criteria. Using the PSA as data, this paper utilizes content analysis in an intrinsic evaluative qualitative case study. Analysis will be done through representation theory, social representation from social psychology, and representation from cultural studies. The PSA under study is the Jamaican state's attempt at a wide-scale institution of its hegemonic social representations as the government attempts to achieve consensus on the PSA's content in a socially fragmented country whose indigenous popular music cuts across social boundaries, but there are polarizing views about Jamaican Creole despite its widespread use. From Stuart Hall's perspective on representation, there are clear attempts in the PSA to achieve identification by a Jamaican audience for citizens to see themselves in the video. The concrete forms resulting from objectification, which can then be broadcast, are intended to become part of what are called conceptual maps, which persons must have in common for a shared meaning to be created. These conceptual maps are maps of meaning or frameworks of intelligibility, which must be learned as culture is not passed down biologically. The PSA is therefore the Jamaican government's attempt to insert its policies, which have been translated from standard English into Jamaican Creole and utilize the medium of Jamaican popular music for broadcast into the Jamaican population's maps of meaning and effect the desired behavior change. Hall's understanding of communication's connection with power, with those who wield power determining what is represented in media, is critical. The PSAs are therefore at that all-important juncture in Hall's conceptualization of representation, knowledge, and power. Language is, of course, central to the communication. The Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA uses a number of languages which Hall identifies, and you can see those on screen. It uses a language of customized dance. It uses a language of dress. It uses a language of facial gesture. Of course, there is oral communication, and there is text at points throughout the video. For example, stay hydrated, the advice to stretch after exercise, and then there's an ending message, take care of you, before the Ministry of Health and Wellness logo comes on screen. The locations in the video are chosen to achieve identification among the Jamaican population and therefore use well-known landmarks. And although it is shot only in the capital, well, the scenes that are easily identified, that it is expected that these scenes would be familiar to persons across the island. There is a Palisadoes walkway, which we have spoken about at some length, and it is in the beginning and closing scenes. The market is used extensively in verse 1, and Burton, 1997, identifies the market as one of the site of communication ecologies in Jamaica. There's a child on a bicycle in a housing complex in the first verse, and housing is a very important issue to Jamaicans. The transport center in Halfway Tree is a striking built environment landmark, and the state-owned Jamaican Urban Transit Company, JUTC bus, which is featured in the third chorus of the PSA, is utilized for dance moves. There's an overhead shot of Halfway Tree, which is the capital of urban St. Andrew, commonly conflated with Kingston. But their Halfway Tree is a renowned central spot in Jamaica's conception of itself, not only as a built environment space, and it is also a psychological borderline between the uptown and the downtown, between social classes in Jamaica. And then there is a scene overlooking Kingston and urban St. Andrew with the persons exercising with the sea behind them. This comes up several times in the second verse of the PSA. And this again reinforces Jamaica's islandness. In that scene, what we see is the housing stock, the buildings, commercial developments going to the coast and the sea beyond. So, the Jamaican Ministry of Health and Wellness's Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA utilizes tangible and intangible resources rooted in Jamaica's ontology as a formerly colonized Caribbean island in an attempt to address a health crisis, which is also directly attributable to the country being an island state. The PSA uses dancehall, the most recent phase of Jamaican popular music, as a means of communication to broadcast a simplified version of government policy translated from the state's official language, Standard English, to Jamaican Creole, which is widely used but still relegated or confined to mainly informal situations. The public service announcement also uses other languages, including dance and gestures, and locations chosen to achieve identification to resonate with the Jamaican population, with the PSA having a strictly Jamaican target audience. It does this in order to achieve behavior change to healthy exercise and diet choices. In its choice of language and location, the Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right PSA aims for identification in that target audience, including to spread hegemonic social representations among the population. A measure of progress in spreading the message would be emancipated social representations, as various groups in the society share their interpretation of the campaign's content, and that is part of the larger study of which this paper is a component, to see if these emancipated social representations have been achieved. The walkway on the Palisades Strip is a part of the PSA's closing scene, which once again reinforces the state's deployment of Jamaican's island ontology. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Where's the title? Okay, sorry. My name is Pali. I'm an associate professor from Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So today I will talk about an island in China, which is very south of China, called Hainan. As the second largest island in the Greater China region next to Taiwan, the image of Hainan Islands oscillates between that of a borderland between exotic charms and a frontier with socioeconomic developmental potentials until today. Covering both visual and textual representations of Hainan from the late 19th century to early 20th century, in this talk, I examine literary representations found in travelogues and also anthropological documentation produced by various hosts of agents, for example, Han Chinese from the mainland, Western missionaries and explorers, and sorry, I don't have time to talk about the Japanese representations in this talk between that period of time. So through examining these texts, I aim to contour Hainan's islandness that may place the history of island hitherto marginalized in its proper place, which sheds light on how we can reconsider Hainan not as tabula rasa in both imperial and national gaze from the above. Okay, so I just want to quickly, talk about travel or travel. What is travel in China? Travel or you in classical Chinese philosophy is a very significant practice in the cultivation of the literati. So during their travels, literati or officials apply a kind of rhythm, qi rhythm, by connecting with the nature. However, Chinese history has relatively few accounts of travel to the islands. I mean, there might be also because of this what we call the Huayi distinction that differentiate the civilized Han people and the barbarians on the margins. So the islands are usually described as a kind of a sub-frontier, a more marginal land than the mainland frontier. This marginality stems from the natural water division between the islands and the mainland, as well as the physical and the psychological distance from Han Chinese culture. So I will skip the part about my introduction of the early travelogues of Han Chinese to a lot of places, including Southeast Asia, North Africa, and East Africa. And go straight to this part. I will say how the island of Hainan is a prime example of a marginal writing in Chinese history. Since the Song dynasty, most of the local histories of Hainan were not written by the local Han Chinese, but rather by the officials from Guangdong, with a little input from the local aboriginals, who are mainly Li and the Miao people in the tribes. But we do have very famous historical literati figures from Chinese history, for example, Su Dongpo. But I think during the late Qing dynasty, the travelogues written by the Chinese elites, for example, underwent a significant change as a result of the enormous shifts in Chinese society facing the West, and also the global political and cultural landscape. And so also maybe in Benedict Anderson's oft-quoted Imagined Communities, the travelogue also constructs a kind of a simultaneity and synchronicity between the author, reader, and the nation state through the narratives. So I will, in this project, I'm actually looking at travelogues about Hainan by various travelers, including Han Chinese officials, individual travelers, Western missionaries, explorers, anthropologists, and also Japanese travelers and intelligence gatherers who could have written, who could all have written accounts of their travels on island based on their experience. So I argue that this kind of travelogue with this very specific touch of personal and experiential genre is an effective lens through which we can understand the connection between the island and also modern identity. So let's begin with the travelogues written by the Han Chinese. So there is no doubt that for the Han Chinese living on the mainland during the late Qing and the early Republican periods, the location of Hainan Island underwent a dramatic shift in their cognitive genealogy. In 1914, official Xia Shouhua, who was also a late Qing revolutionary, made an expedition to Hainan Island at the age of 60. So he set off on this trip from Haikou, the very top of the island, all the way from the west to the east, and completing his tour around the island in 2 months without going to the mountain area in the middle of the island where the Aboriginals lives. As a revolutionary active in changing the social status in China, Xia's perception of Hainan as an island for the emergent Republic of China and as a nation was no longer situated in this center-periphery framework with very blurred and open borders, or in the structure of the Huayi order I just showed you. Rather, Hainan was placed in an interior enclosed with the military and economic borders of the state. So he attempted to stabilize this border by means of a homogenization and flattening within the border itself. So in preface to his travelogue, for example, Xia reflects on the Han-Li relations, the Han Chinese and the local tribes people in Hainan. In a brief review of the history of Hainan from Qing and the Han dynasty, like 2,000 years ago, to the present day, he argues that the Li of Hainan, regardless of whether they are born and bred, were isolated from the rest of the world and were still in the chaos of the ages. So the Chinese, however, are largely responsible for the tensions in this relationship between the Li and the Han, and for the conquest and killing of the Li by the Han throughout the history. And in terms of political stability, he seems to also to believe that the Han should have treated the Li more equally, and that this equality was based on Li's attainment of a greater enlightenment and culture. So there is a paradox in this narrative. So he is appreciative of the Li in Hainan, praising them for being more industrious than Han, and he also notes that women in Hainan are far more industrious than men, with women doing most of the farm works, while men are rest at home. So in summary, I think Sha's travelogue represents a significant shift in the perception of Hainan Island by the Han Chinese from a peripheral frontier to an interior enclosed within the military and the economic borders of the state. So was the function of the reflection on the Han-Li relations. From other people's eyes, Hainan looks differently. While the Han Chinese from mainland were forced by foreign military, political, and economic forces in the late 19th century and early 20th century to take Hainan more seriously and to rethink its place in the emergent nation state, the interest of European and American travelers in Hainan did not come from a desire to, frontier or to fortify it, to delineate the contours of the nation. So from the perspective of the European states' own internal nationalism and boundaries, as well as their colonial expansion, missionary activities and imperial interests, and islands such as Hainan belong to a much wider group of islands linked to the countries of Southeast Asia and also small islands in the Pacific. So let's see an example with the French missionary whose name is François-Marie Savina. So Savina was born in France, Brittany, and at the age of 25, he actually joined the society, the mission of foreign countries in Paris before coming to the northern part of Vietnam that is very close to Hainan actually. So in October 1928, together with KMT, a nationalist Chinese officer, he became the first Westerner to cross the Wuzhishan mountains in the middle of the island. So it was quite a great deal. So one of the most impressive aspects of Savina's travel is his very different understanding of Hainan's place in the region from that of the Han Chinese traveler. With a keen interest in the local language of Hainan, his understanding of Hainan is almost entirely based on its linguistic networks. So he argues, for example, that because the military and political administration of Hainan was in hands of Han people, Han Chinese, which became, the Cantonese, became the official language of Hainan, the central region has not been able to penetrate because it still speaks a language used by, other people or people who came to the island 2,000 years ago. And also for the Li, tribal people, they are the earliest inhabitants in the island. So the question is, where do they come from? So through the language, he tries to rechart the origin of residents on the island that is linked to Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. So in other words, Savina intended to reconnect Hainan with its neighboring islands, regions, and people by dissolving the national boundaries that Han Chinese like Sha tried to reinforce. So the third example is from an American explorer whose name is Leonard Clark. In 1937, so not only him, but another guy called Nicholas Smith, they traveled to Hainan via Hong Kong and recorded what they saw and heard in the area, mainly in the Li, in the mountain area. So their trips details reviewed in travelogues is called, among the big notes, Lis of Hainan, white tribesmen with top notes roam the little known interior of this big and strategically important island in China Sea. This is the original title. So it was published in National Geographic magazine along a number of photographs in the documentary film. So Leonard Clark actually has very intimate knowledge of many, remote areas around the world, but he has knowledge of local affairs actually led the American OSS, the forerunner of CIA, to ask him to organize guerrilla activities and espionage in China and Mongolia. So his visits to Hainan also coincided with the outbreak of the Sino-Japanese War in 1937. So Clark's writing is very beautiful, and his observation of natural and people are full of enthusiasm, curiosity, and imagination. And as a tourist to Hainan from the West, and unlike Savina's perspective as a European missionary in the 20s, I think his trips to Hainan took place in a also very different kind of historical and international, political context. Yeah. Okay. So, so he has, he basically is also an intelligence gatherer, or if not a spy. So there in the region. So I think we can also see his account also very differently. So I think one of the central aspects of his travel is how he tried to communicate and interacts with the locals, including different groups of the Li people. And he pays a lot of attention also to the animals and, and of course the landscape. And his, I think, travelogue is different and also because of it's full of professionally taken photographs of people and the nature. And it's totally of a different quality, from the previous travelogues and their visual documentations of the island. And so I think, as I don't have much time, these are just examples of the images he took, which is also very, beautiful. Because the title of the talk is related to artistic products, I just want to quickly show you some visual materials I have collected so far in relation to these travelogues, and these will become the raw material of my artistic projects, probably a video work. And so, for example, this is the documentary film that was taken by Clark. It's very rich, it's very interesting. And there is a film that is made by the communist government in the 50s, depicting the life of the Li people. And in the 70s, there is a film about these overseas Chinese who were invited back to construct the new People's Republic of China, and how they were actually maltreated during the, Cultural Revolution, for example, and how this kind of, diaspora, Chinese diaspora, is related to the island. But I'm also working on a very specific project, art project related to Hainan. I think I will also use my research in the travelogues and films about the island. It's called the Asian Cocoa Project. So it's a group, will be a group exhibition, and me and my work partner will work on this, cocoa history in Hainan, which will be, I think, very much related to all these information I give about, Hainan and its history. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Any questions? Any questions from people online in the same panel? The people on Zoom, do you have any question regarding to this presentation? Phil Sensei, please go ahead.
Hi, I enjoyed your paper very much. I wondered how much you're going to talk about or engage in your research about more modern mainland Chinese perceptions of Hainan with regard to things such as tourism.
Right, yeah, actually Hainan is always on the current newspapers in China, in contemporary China, because by the time of 2025 it will become so-called free trade zone kind of thing. And so I think this is the mainstream narrative of Hainan today. So my research is also to reflect on the history of Hainan, because in the mainstream narrative about Hainan Island, we only see it as a place where we can do anything. We can open casino, we can welcome Russian tourists, but nobody is really know what's behind the history. So the researchers really want to be a critical alternative to look at Hainan. But of course, I mean, the starting point is stimulated by the current narrative. So I will of course mention that part too in my research. Thank you.
Okay, one more question. Please go ahead. Any question? No?
Can I just ask one really quick question, if possible?
Yes, please.
It was just out of interest. I was interested in what the population size of the island is.
The size is just a little bit smaller than Taiwan, so it's pretty big. It's of a different size. I don't know the exact number, but it's big. It's
Okay, thank you.
yeah. I think if you drive from the northern to the south, it's around 4 hours. Yeah.
Okay. If there is no more question, we move to Professor Phil's presentation. Because he has a meeting in 30 minutes, so we better play his video first. Is that okay, Phil? Thank you very much. All right.
One of the most successful new acts in the international Anglophone music scene in 2022 was Wet Leg, an ensemble led by singer-guitarist Hester Chambers and Ryan Teasdale. One element that was prominent in the band's biography was its origin in the Isle of Wight, a 384 square kilometre island lying off the south coast of England. This paper focuses on the role of the island in the band's biography, perception, and oeuvre, with particular regard to its self-produced music videos. The Isle of Wight has a high population of older residents and is politically conservative. Tourism has been a major element of the economy and its way of life since the mid-1850s. An estimated 2.6 million tourists now visit annually, contributing around £500 million to the island's economy. Along with material heritage tourism focused on old towns, buildings and monuments, coastal and nature-oriented tourism is a major draw. The latter aspect is recognised by over 50% of the island being designated as an area of outstanding national beauty in 1963. These aspects are reflected in internal identity perception. Research conducted on the island by myself and Adam Gridodge in 2010 revealed a common feeling that one of the main appeals of the island was that it was quintessentially English, like England used to be at an earlier time when life was, supposedly, less frenetic and when reported crime levels were lower. Wet Leg's formation in the Isle of Wight by two resident performers has been cited multiple times in media coverage. This does not so much reflect any notable pedigree for popular musicians on the island. Since the 1980s onwards, in fact, there's been a lack of a recognisable musical scene there. Chambers and Teasdale met while studying at the Isle of Wight's Independent Music College and formed Wet Leg in 2019. The duo's debut single, Chaise Longue, released in 2021, became an internet hit, with its music video receiving close to 11 million views to date. Wet Leg can be characterised as post-punk in terms of its core instrumentation, drums, bass, guitars, and occasional synthesizers and keyboards, short duration tracks, moderately fast tempos, and relatively simple chord progressions and riffs. The band's arrangements feature sharp texture changes between sections, for example moving from bass, drum and vocal-dominated verses directly into louder guitar-driven choruses. This is common practice from grunge-era bands. The guitar parts are prominent with a mix of chordal strumming, short repeating riffs and looping melodic parts that add counter melodies to the main vocal lines, which are often semi-spoken. The lyrics to Wet Leg's breakthrough track, Chaise Longue, are notably fractured. The song is funny and sexually flirtatious and involves repeated references to a chaise longue, a type of sofa, and has soft verses and intense instrumental breaks. The Chaise Longue video established a distinct aesthetic for the band, one that both complemented the pastoral nostalgia often associated with Isle of Wight culture and adopted styles from the cottagecore aesthetic, which can be characterized as a romanticized approach to rural living, traditional crafts and fashion. The video avoided the option of visually illustrating the song's lyrics and instead coalesced a quirky identity for the band by combining cottagecore imagery and more localized elements. A house, owned by Chambers' mother, features prominently, and the music video is unsettling in the manner of Andrew Wyeth's paintings or folk horror films such as The Village. Indeed, Teasdale has identified that the duo wanted to create, quote, a weird prairie cottagecore world for the band in the video, an aspect that was carried through to the band's subsequent video, Wet Dream. The Wet Dream video opens with the duo emerging from the same house, clad in similar cottagecore outfits. One significant difference is they both have inflated lobster claws on their hands. The video features Teasdale miming the song's lyrics in various rural locations, accompanied by other band members. The lobster claw motif from the meal table scene, reminiscent of the Mad Hatter's Tea Party in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, gives the video a softly surreal feel akin to that of early to mid-1980s MTV videos, such as Blondie's Island of Lost Souls. Expanded their world beyond the cottage and field setting in subsequent videos. Oh No and Angelica, both 2022, was shot in iconic island locations. While similar in being filmed on or adjacent to coastal structures and thereby enmeshing local place mythology in the band's oeuvre, Angelica and Oh No differ markedly in tone and theme. The first one was shot around St. Catherine's Lighthouse on the southern tip of the island. For the highly personal song about the complications of female friendship, the band dispensed with narrative motifs and pseudo-surrealism in favour of a simple video featuring Teasdale and Chambers dancing, play fighting and hugging in the sunshine, enjoying the coastal landscape. By contrast, the Oh No video expands the theme of its song's lyrics about smartphone addiction through a striking juxtaposition of location footage and visual overlay. The video was shot on a grey and blustery day on the lower platform of a chairlift at Allen Bay. The chairlift's an imposing concrete and metal structure on the western tip of the island, upon which Teasdale and Chambers dance in thick robe suits, giving them an unsettling Yeti-like appearance. These aspects are striking enough, the bleak industrial functionality of the lift station accompanied by fantasy folkloric figures. But the image is further complicated by the overlay of comments received on the band's social media feeds that variously praise, critique, and/or express disinterest in the group. When Wet Leg were invited to perform their debut hit Chaise Longue at the 2023 Brit Music Awards, they retained some motifs from the original music video, but departed significantly by having the song accompanied by a Morris dance troupe performing a specially choreographed routine. Morris dancing is a traditional English form that involves small troops of dancers patterning figures by means of steps, hops and leaps, often wielding handkerchiefs, sticks or swords and wearing leg belts. The Boss Morris troupe that appeared on stage with Wet Leg is an all-female experimental ensemble. Along with unusual, highly stylized costumes and face makeup, they also regularly include figures dressed as a stylized owl, a minotaur, and Jack the Green, a performer dressed as a tree. And these figures also appeared on stage at the Brits. The troupe's choreography for the song had to engage with the difficulty of adapting a style usually performed by dancers in close proximity to the long, thin, T-shaped stage space they were asked to perform on. The overall spectacle was both striking and indeed manifested a mildly surrealist dissonance, similar to that evident in their Wet Dream and Oh No videos, creating an emergent folk fantasy aesthetic.
Look at me, I went to school and I got a degree. All my friends call it the big T. I went to school and I got the big D. 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 I went to school and I got the big D. Is your muffin butter? Would you like us to assign someone to butter your muffin? Excuse me? What? Excuse me? What? Hey you, over there, on the chaise longue in your underwear, what are you doing? You should be horizontal now. What? you like us to send someone to worry your mother? Excuse me. What? Excuse me. What? Hey you, in the front row. Are you coming backstage after the show? Because I got the shades long in my dressing room and a pack of warm beer.
The music videos, the awards ceremony stage performance and the media profile of Wet Leg that we've discussed represent a droll, idiosyncratic expression of Isle of Wight identity in the popular music sphere that the band had characterised as personal and experimental rather than strategic and programmatic. As such, Wet Leg can be considered to have produced an indie vision of the early 21st century Isle of Wight, reflective of their social cultural experience of it. The soft surrealism evident in the band's work also brings an innovative inflection to the island and is all the more vivid for its articulation in iconic Isle of Wight landscapes, offering new ways of imagining and representing place.
Thank you for Phil Sansen's presentation. Now we are at a Q&A session. Okay? So I know your time is very tight. Phil will have to leave in 5 minutes. Question? Okay, Henry has a question. Wait a minute.
Thank you, Phil. Henry Johnson. It's interesting that wet leg means like outsider, which to an Islander whiter would mean usually an English person, yet inherently their sense of being on the Isle of Wight, their identity seems to draw very much from Englishness. Is there a sense of contradiction there between using English like Horace Dancing to create a sense of Island of Wight's identity, or are they trying to reject it at the same time?
Can you hear the question?
No, could you repeat, please?
Can you come a little closer to the microphone? Yeah, sorry. Yes, that's one.
Hello.
Can you hear?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you, Henry.
Okay, Wet Leg, the name of the band, it means outsider on the Isle of Wight.
No. They actually they said that in an interview, and I've actually seen the video of the interview where they say that. And Hester Chambers, Rhiannon Teasdale says that, and you see Hester Chambers going, "What?" No, apparently they made it up from translating emojis on the phone. They were playing with them, and they got wet and leg. And they've since put this thing out that wet leg actually means someone who's crossed over the Solent Channel. But it's one of these modern inventions.
Okay, good. But is it also interesting that they use Englishness in terms of creating their identity on the Isle of Wight, when often small islands off the mainland are trying to reject the mainland culture?
Yeah, that's absolutely precisely what interested me so much, because generally the Isle of Wight is one of these islands that doesn't quite compute in island studies, because it doesn't seem to have an identity that's significantly different from either Hampshire, the county that it notionally belongs to, or Southern England in general. So given this situation, the fact that they have this idiosyncratic, softly surreal inflection of quintessential Englishness, and invent bits of folklore, like bits of folkloric language, characters like the Mokuren, who are these new invented, kind of folkloric figures, strikes me as something you wouldn't have anticipated in early 21st century England, especially in a genre like kind of post-punk rock grunge, which is not known for strong senses of place in its lyrics or delivery. So, yeah, very surprising all around.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One more question, if it's quick. Thank you. Okay. If no other question, let's move on to the next presentation. The Junko Sensei. Okay, thank you very much, Phil. Hope the time is okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay,
Bye.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to our next presentation. Let me share the screen. Okay, so remove this. Okay, slideshow.
In the next stage.
Yeah, this one is okay. Okay, the floor is yours.
Is it okay? You need closer. Close. Thank you very much, Mo Sensei. I was as chair of this session, but helped by Mo Sensei. My name is Junko Konishi, Okinawa Prefecture University of Arts, and Reconnecting Japanese Islands by the Mokuren-Related Nembutsu Song and Dances is my paper title. The prototype of Acer, the performing Ice of Okinawa, was originated from mainland Japan. However, the history and root is not clear. In this paper, remarking on the similarity of lyrics, movements, and melody patterns of Acer and Mokuren-related Nembutsu song and dances in Hokuriku, these relationships to Kitamae-bune, a cargo vessel, sailing, and commercial, are explored. This is the second year of this research, and the final goal of this study is to reconnect the performing arts and people of the islands on the past sailing route. Mokuren is one of the disciples of the historical Buddha. He is famed for hell tour legend, seeking and rescuing his mother, who fell into the hell. Finally, Mokuren rescued his mother by holding a Buddhist service called Urabon-e. The legend is considered to be the origin of Urabon-e. Urabon-e and Nembutsu for praying Buddha did not accompany dances. In 938, Kuya, the saint, studied a practice of Nembutsu with dance. Entertainers transformed it to Nembutsu odori, accepting popular musical and dance elements. In 1419, Nembutsu odori for Urabon-e was performed in Kyoto. In the early 17th century, Nembutsu odori developed to be Furyu odori, a popular Bon dance style. Bon odori has various forms. However, the most Bon odori are dissociated from Mokuren's legend. The only exceptions are said to be chongare or jokabe, and I add a prototype Acer to this. Initially, Acer, accompanied with Nembutsu, was performed at a village during the Bon period of the lunar calendar. Gibbo refers to those lyrics of Nembutsu Uda was originated from Mokuren's legend in mainland Japan. The venerable priest Taicho, who stayed in Okinawa from 1603 to 1606, believed to be disseminated Nembutsu. However, he did not transmitted both Nembutsu Uta and dance. The chart shows the terminology. From left to right of the horizontal axis, secret to the propane. The vertical is the time axis. I locate chongare and Acer in a broken circle. This table compares the beginning part of this text. There are a lot of similar contents as being underlined. So please watch a video of chongare. The Bon odori dance is performed, and then the chongare of Mokuren is performed. You see the differences between these dance forms. The following is a Chongare of Mokuren by different group from neighboring district. Then please watch a traditional but stage-oriented ace of Chunjun Nagari. You may see the differences as well as the similarities. Interestingly, the dancer's costume of the ace indicates they are as monks. Let's see the video. The next is different groups Chongare. The movement is more clear. The movement is very simple. And the next is Acer or the prototype. Because the drum and hand clapping is different, but similar movements may be same. And this is a melody pattern. Melodies of the last groups, Chongare and Acer, sound very different. However, the similar up and down movements appear. Why do Ryukyu and Acer and Chongare of Hokuriku have similarities? I want to focus on the commercial and physical distribution by Kitamaebune, the cargo vessel. This took the Japan Sea route from Matsumae or Hokkaido to Shimonoseki. Then the commerce was extended to Ryukyu, supposed by the Kaga and Satsuma domains that promoted smuggling to make a profit. I hypothesize that Nembutsu odori were transmitted from the Hokuriku area to Ryukyu by monks, merchants, and adherents of Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Because the Hokuriku area was the place of uprising of the Ikko sect or Jodo Shinshu sect followers. The segment of Mokuren-Related Nembutsu songs and lessons remained in some islands. However, the complete versions are transmitted only in Hokuriku and Okinawa. The highest profit ratio in the Satsuma domain was the commerce of the sea cabbage. The sea cabbage is a popular food in Okinawa. However, it is only a product in Hokkaido. In the beginning, merchants from Omi employed Hokuriku sailors to ship the sea cabbages of Hokkaido for dispatching to Osaka and Kyoto, and then it was sent to Ryukyu. Taking the land route from Hokuriku to Kyoto, the cost was expensive. Then in 1939, Kaga domain started to send it by western route city. In the late 18th, a large amount of sea cabbage from the East Hokkaido sailed to Ryukyu, and a trade house was established in Neha. In 1814, a family in Toyama, Hokuriku, organized a smuggling with Satsuma domain. In 1847, a group of merchants from Toyama sold medicine and Satsuma domain. To prevent the money from being offered Honganji Temple in Kyoto, Satsuma domain that faced financial hardship also blessed the Jodo Shinshu sect Buddhism. However, in the early 1830s, 60% of ordinary people in Kagoshima belonged to Jodo Shinshu sect. In Ryukyu, ruled by Shimazu or Satsuma domain since 1609, Jodo Shinshu sect was blessed. However, Nakamura family transmitted it by the early 19th century. A chronography of the transmission of the Jodo Shinshu sect of Buddhism and the performing arts indicates there were no records of Nembutsu in Ryukyu until the middle of the 18th century, while Saint Taiju is regarded as a founder of Nembutsu. After the smuggling route of sea cabbage was established, Juri, the prostitute, started Nembutsu. At the end of the 18th century, when a lot of sea cabbages was imported, Chinen composed the first tune of Nembutsu. In the middle of the 19th century, when merchants from Toyama sold medicine in the Satsuma domain, the oldest Chongare text was written in Toyama. Thus, the commerce of sea cabbage and the establishment of Acer go simultaneously. There were supposed to be a lot of ports of call for smuggling routes of sea cabbage, and segments of Nembutsu Odori and Nembutsu Uta may have transmitted to those islands. The final goal of this study is to relocate these local performing arts to the sailing routes, rediscover the common ground and the differences between them, re-evaluate each one, and promote communications among these islanders for solving the daily life problems to revitalize the island culture. So in the beginning, I researched Ihea Island, a remote island of Okinawa Island, to collect information on Nembutsu Uta and practice cave for past ancestors viewer. And Masako Sakai's research in the Amami Islands helps investigate the transmission of songs of the dead and Acer-related performing arts among these islands. I visited Nakajima Island of Kutsuna Islands, Ehime Prefecture, it's famous for the citrus cultivation, and got information about Kutsuna Shogun Navy. Many motif pictures of ships were dedicated to the Shinto shrine temple. On Nakajima Island, ecological activity by newcomers on the active, they will be helpful to my research project. So these are references. I thank you for your attention.
Fascinating presentation. Welcome for all kinds of comments and questions.
I have one, the one holding the mic. I would just like to ask, is there a way that the song and dance was notated when it was transmitted? Was there a standardized way, or was it orally? How did they pass down this tradition?
So as for Chongare, they transmit oral transmission, but in 1840s and 1850s, so the texts were written, but just on text, just text. And as for Acer, so Chinen composed the tune in the early 1980s, 19th century, but at that time they did not write it, but later accompanied by Sanshin. So there's a Sanshin, Kunkunshi notation of Sanshin. So after that, the Sanshin melody is transmitted by the notation. Thank you.
Thank you.
you can also ask the people in Zoom.
So, is there any questions, online people? How I can see either people?
One last question, please. If anyone from online has any question, please.
University. So it was a very interesting presentation, and I just want to ask you, mentioning the Kitamai as a means of cultural transportation, but it was essentially an economic tool, and it was very dangerous to do the shipping, and I think there was not much space on the ships too. So how would this culture be transported on the ships? Like would people, some of the sailors doing these dances, or what would be the way of transferring culture through the shipping routes? Because I know it's a very important tool to connect the islands around Japan.
Yes, I suppose monks from Kyoto or Hokuriku area were easy to take the ship from at the Hokuriku area in Toyama or Kanazawa area, and then the ship goes to the Shimonoseki, and then they can transfer the ship to the other route. So it is interesting because Bonbonori, like that kind of Buddhism, remains Oita prefecture, and then this area to the mostly part of the island of Nagasaki and other places. So I think they took and changed the next vessel and go to islands. That's because in Amami a lot of segments of such Buddhism transmitted, but at that time Satsuma domain restricted the religious, so they did not appear in front, but they transmitted culture. So thank you very much.
Okay, the time is up. The last presentation from Simona Zollet from Hiroshima University.
Okay. Okay, so I'm a little bit out of place. This is a panel mainly about arts and literature. Mine is more about like social trends, but I will try to fit in as best I can. So this presentation is about lifestyle migration to small islands, and it's a research project I have been doing with Mo for quite a long time now. And how lifestyle migration somehow connects with a small island community resilience. So my background is actually between sustainability science and rural sociology. I have been doing research about rural community resilience, but also about sustainable and local food systems, urban to rural migration, and similar topics. So this presentation is a blend of. Oh yes, what's wrong? Okay, good. So in this presentation, I will try to contextualize a bit.
There's no battery.
Okay, no problem. So I will try to contextualize a bit what is happening in Japan within bigger debates on counter-urbanization, lifestyle migration, and how it connects to attempts to revitalize or regenerate small communities, especially in peripheral areas. And especially I'm going to talk a little bit about how people who move to these peripheral communities, small islands, rural areas, these newcomers interact with the local communities and also play an important role in creating networks that connect the inside of the community or inside of the island with what is outside of it, and somehow create these networks that help to revitalize or increase the resilience of the community themselves. So, as also Mo has introduced a little bit in his presentation, the dominant narrative, especially in Japan, but not just in Japan, around rural, peripheral, island area is a narrative of decline. So these are peripheral areas that are basically declining, aging rates is extremely high, the population is increasing year by year. And in Japan there is this term, is Genkai Shuraku, that basically was used or is still used to describe villages, small rural villages where more than half of the population is over 65 years old. So basically places that are probably going to disappear in the next 20 or 30 years. And in the Seto Inland Sea, which is the site of our fieldwork, there are over 400 islands, and most of them have these characteristics of being small, peripheral, so kind of these rural features of these islands. And in particular, we are, well, what I will be presenting today is focused on the Akinada Islands, also called Tokishima Kaido, which is where some of you went yesterday in the field trip. And as you can see, just from some basic data about these islands, the population, the data between 2000 and in less than 10 years, in about 10 years, the population has decreased by about 1/3. The aging rate is extremely high in all of the islands. It's in all cases above 50%. And if you look at the demographic balance, the people going out to live versus the people who come in the communities to live, you can see how the people between their 20s and their 40s are the people who are leaving the island. So you have these negative numbers. What is happening basically is the need to bring people back to this community or to attract people into these communities. And so there are different ways in which these processes can happen. And if we look at the international literature about migration into islands, into rural places, into peripheral places, we often find this concept of lifestyle migration. So lifestyle migration is basically a movement that is not motivated by economic reasons, but it's mainly motivated by the search for a better quality of life. And more rural areas, islands, peripheral places are becoming places where people are looking for a better quality of life, essentially. And often this concept of lifestyle migration is portrayed in a negative way, or at least in a critical way, because you often have these affluent people from rich countries going into less affluent countries to live, where cost of living is lower, they can have a really nice lifestyle and enjoy these beautiful places and so on. But in Japan, really, you don't have this negative view of lifestyle migration, because the ability to attract new residents into these small island and rural communities is seen as essential to keep these communities alive. And also, especially since COVID, increasingly also the Japanese government and local governments are recognizing the importance of also new forms of mobility that are not simply moving from a city to a rural and settling down there to live, but also people who have a more flexible or lifestyle where maybe they move from place to place in different times of the years. And also, one of the theory behind this attempts to attract people into peripheral areas is this idea of that innovation starts with the young, the fools, so to speak, and the outsiders. So what they're trying to do, the idea behind this is, you get new people who have ideas, who have willingness to try something new, and people who are from outside because they can see the community and the place with different eyes compared to the people who have been living their whole lives. And these people are somehow the key to revitalize rural communities. And so when we look about who are the people who are moving from urban to rural and island communities in Japan, they're mainly domestic migrants, so they're Japanese people. But often there are people who have an international experience. They're often people who have lived abroad for some time and then they decide to come back to Japan. They're not happy with their life in Tokyo. They want to try something new in smaller communities in the periphery. And they're mainly young nowadays. So in the past, urban to rural migration was mainly a post-retirement kind of thing. So people, after retirement, they went back to the countryside, they went back to their hometown and so on. But now increasingly we have younger people who are moving into these smaller communities in the periphery. And also they're often somehow entrepreneurs or at least people who want to start their own business independently. And they feel that these smaller communities give them some opportunities to create something new, something of their own. So the periphery in this sense is sort of becoming, to some extent, a site of experimentation for new ways of living, new ways of engaging with each other, engaging with the communities. But another interesting aspect about Japan, and I think it's quite unique, is that lifestyle migration in itself is a very individual kind of trend. It's people who want to change their life and they want to go to a different place. But Japan is somehow trying to pull this trend into their own policies and especially in the policies about revitalizing rural areas. So, for example, one of the initiatives by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communication is this so-called Chikyo-Koshikyo-Rutai initiative that maybe since I mentioned before. So, which can be translated into Regional Revitalization Cooperation Group. And basically what this initiative is doing is getting people who live in urban areas to live into rural areas for between a period of 1 to 3 years. And these people get a salary and they get a housing for free. And in these 3 years they have to engage in any kind of project or different project that somehow can benefit the local community. And the bigger idea behind this is to get these people to settle down more permanently into these communities after their 3 years period as Chikyo-Koshikyo-Rutai is over. And this is actually being quite successful so far, in the sense that more than half of these people actually end up settling down in the communities where they did their 3-year term as Chikyo-Koshikyo-Rutai. And the initiative went from 31 local governments involved to more than 1,000 involved right now, and we have now more than 6,000 active members, which doesn't include the ones already graduated from the program. And another policy by the government is attracting the so-called Kankei Jinko, which could be translated as relational population somehow, which basically somehow covers those flexible mobilities I mentioned before. So people who don't really move into a community but somehow keep engaging with a place over and over as repeated visitors, and people who take part in local projects, or people who maybe have second houses in the place, and so on and so forth. So this research on lifestyle migrants, it's been going on for about 5 years now. We have data from 19 islands, 52 interviews, and about 1/3 of these interviews are with Chikyo-Koshikyo-Rutai, either current Chikyo-Koshikyo-Rutai or former ones. And as anybody who has familiarity with small rural and island communities in Japan will tell you, one thing is that it's really hard to get into the community in a way. For example, it's to gain entry into the community, even in the sense of finding a house or finding land if you want to do farming, because it's not as simple as going to the real estate company and finding a house to buy. You have to engage with people, with the local people, and talk to them and get them to point you to a place, to a house that you can rent, this kind of small issue that make it difficult for outsiders to get into the community. But people who are part of this Chikyo-Koshikyo-Rutai initiative get help from the local government, get a house for free, so somehow they get easier entry into the community. And since they are basically employed by the local government for the most part, they're also kind of have this sense of trust about them, so local people tend to trust them more easily, so for them it becomes much easier to engage in projects, they get the local people support much more easily. So there is this, so they're not like the normal newcomers who really need to work hard to get into the community, so they get this easier way into the community somehow. So in a way they have this characteristic of becoming embedded into the community much faster than other newcomers would. But at the same time they have this important feature of being able to bridge between the community and the outside, because they usually come from urban areas, so they have their own social network in other places, they have connections, and they're able to attract other newcomers often. So they have this kind of dual identity about them. So just quickly present two case studies from those, the Tobishima Kaide, those islands I mentioned before. Because we have been working, especially I have been working with a newcomer network. It's called Tobishima Life, and currently it's about 12 members, and basically all of them were former Chikyo Shikurukutai, so they did 3 years, and then they graduated from the program, and now they are living in the islands. Most of them, like now, are
recording in progress.
And they basically created this volunteer organization with the main aim to, again, be a bridge between each island, so to connect each island with each other, first of all, because these islands have each of them has quite a unique identity, which is different from the next island. So somehow, even between the neighboring island, there's not a lot of communication or cooperation. So their first island, the aim is to connect the islands, and then is to connect the chain of islands with the outside, and especially bring in newcomers, people who are interested in moving into this island or in somehow engaging with what is happening in this island.
Just a minute, there is no screen sharing dimension. Sometimes it's automatically connect off. Okay.
Yeah, and this is especially, the existence of this network is especially important when you want to attract people who are interested in living in these island communities, because there's basically, especially the local government, although the Chikyo Shikurukutai itself is a local government controlled initiative, but the local government itself is not deeply involved into the whole logistics of finding people, helping them to move into the island. So basically they are somehow filling in this missing part of that what the local government is not doing. And they're helping, for example, they get inquiries from people who are interested in moving there, they help them finding housing, finding what they need to get started in their new life in the island. And we also, speaking about this ability of bridging among different actors within, inside and outside the islands, they actually also approached us as Hiroshima University, especially me, because I was already somehow involved with them, to take part in several projects which were funded by Hiroshima University and who were like social cooperation projects, so the idea of getting together faculty members from the university, the students, and local community members or groups to do some kind of activity together who would connect research, but also like on the ground, like activities and action. And the first thing we did in collaboration with Tobishima Life was creating an immigration experience tour. So this immigration experience tour, they're actually something becoming a trend in Japan. So this idea that you will bring people for a few days into a place, show them around, and basically giving them a sense of how is life in this place or in this community or in this island. And these are usually people who are interested in moving in these places. So we helped them design this kind of immigration experience tour. Then we couldn't do it in practice at that time because there was the issue related to COVID, so we didn't do it in practice. But we created a video about it, which you can find on YouTube. So if you're interested, please take a look. And it was basically a way for us, for the newcomers themselves, to talk about their experience and what they love about living in these islands. And the second project, the second year of the project was basically about this concept of relational population and getting also people to get to know better the island, because we found that people who end up actually moving in the islands are often people who visited many times and they loved the place and eventually they decided to move. So we did several events to get people from outside to connect with locals and already established newcomers, to create this sort of bridge between, again, these three entities, the local people, the newcomers, and the outsiders, so to speak. And finally, we, again, with the support of this funding from Hiroshima University, we also recovered formerly abandoned space within one of these island communities in Italy. So it was basically an abandoned allotment, which was all weedy and fenced off. And so we basically transformed it into a place that can be used freely by community members, passers-by, visitors. And that was a quite interesting process of negotiation of how this place should look like. So we had the university students and faculty who had a certain idea, then the newcomer group who had another idea, and local people who were saying, no, you cannot have a lot of grass because then it's difficult to manage. So that was the sort of compromise we came up with. So it was this compromise, this kind of work between locals, the newcomers, and us. And in the end, we had some events to somehow again connect these different actors from inside and outside the island. So we had a herb-related workshop, which was requested by the local people. And somehow and we hope that this space can also be used by all kinds of people, different generations, and somehow help to connect the inside and outside the island. My time is over, so that's all for my presentation for now, and thank you very much.
We have some time for questions and comments. Oh, all right.
Fred Schumann, University of Guam. First of all, I want to thank you for all the good work that you're doing. It's a very interesting presentation. I have two quick questions. I think for the first time in 2017 or so, we now have more people living in urban environments than rural, right? Since 2017. And there's literature that says that people are moving out of these rural areas in order to become consumers instead of producers. So I want to hear your thoughts about that. People moving because they want jobs to be able to buy the latest whatever, whether it's iPhone or whatever. And then secondly, the Chief Yokoshi program for 3 years and graduating, trying to convince people to stay. You mentioned people leaving because for quality of life reasons. And isn't that also subjective? Maybe quality of life really is better in some of these rural areas. So do you think that 3-year period is to make people shift their thinking to what really is a better quality of life? Thank you.
So can you repeat your first question?
People moving out of rural areas because they're no longer interested in becoming producers, but they're more interested in being consumers, earning money to be able to buy, the latest whatever, car or iPhone or any other type of product, instead of producing anything themselves.
Yeah. So about that. That's certainly true, but we are seeing a shift because, of course, if you think about the Japan of the economic boom, people wanted to go to the city, earn a good salary, make money. So that was somehow the aim that people had in their life. But now, especially if you look at the shifting condition in Japanese society, how
for example, lifelong employment is no longer a thing in Japan either, although it's not as bad as in other places. So people are somehow reevaluating what is important about life, like how much money do I really need to live, and is money really the most important thing? So, and we see among all these people moving back to the countryside are all people who already said, okay, this kind of lifestyle in the city is not for me. I don't want to be a consumer anymore. I want to be a producer again. So among the people we interviewed, we had a lot of people who either started doing organic farming, but also people who did farming more like as for self-sufficiency only, and while having another job on the side. So they want to become producers again to some extent. And that's one thing.
Okay, you have one more question. You are the third.
There was another question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, and so actually the people for this, I have to apply for this program and then get selected by commission by the local government and local people. And these are people who are already highly motivated to live in the countryside. So most of them, well, at least as the statistics say, 60% end up staying because they were already people who wanted to stay, and then they were able to create the condition to stay. So something I couldn't mention because of the time, but one of the components of this program is actually entrepreneurship. So it's not just about doing a service for the community, but also in this 3 years to start to create, hopefully, their own businesses that can sustain them afterwards. Because in rural areas or peripheral areas, there are not a lot of jobs like employment, so you have to create your own employment. So you have this entrepreneurship component, which is also quite important in the program. And so the people who end up staying are also people who create their own businesses usually. There was another question.
From Christine.
Yes?
Wait, I think Zoom drop out.
Can I ask a question? Recording in progress.
Christine, can you ask? You are the next one. Can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. The video dropped out for a second, but you're back again. So sorry, the sound is a little bit difficult in the room, so I apologise if anybody has asked this already. I'm calling you from Scotland, so I'm really interested in everything that's happening in Japan in terms of island repopulation and Kankichenku and that kind of thing. I'm really interested in kind of the differences that there might be kind of in perception of some of these initiatives if they were rolled out over here. And I was quite interested that you were talking about there being people in trusted jobs, and that was one way of integrating them into the community. My question around that is, if you're giving people trusted jobs in the community, is there an education process about understanding the community? Because there is a lot of, there can be a lot of, I don't know what the correct word is, but people talking about newcomers, new people coming into the community and taking jobs, and they don't really understand the community. So I guess my question is there any conflict there between new people coming into these trusted roles, but not necessarily having an understanding of the island communities?
Yeah, so I will get closer to the microphone.
No, it's okay.
It's okay?
It's okay.
So can you hear me clearly? Okay, so yeah, that's definitely an issue, and I know there is some kind of, let's say, first there is a selection process, so you have to somehow submit an application, and then there's an interview, and often, not always, the interview will not have just local government people, but also local people, and often it's not just, you know, you are someone coming out of nowhere and applying for this job. Often, actually, you see that are people who first got in contact with the community members. The community members said, okay, maybe you should apply for this post, and then, so it's would there is often this vetting process. It's an official vetting process by the community itself. So this would require a much more longer explanation, and maybe we can talk later somehow. We can get in touch. But there's definitely this danger of having people who don't really know what they're doing getting into the community, somehow maybe trying to impose their ideas or the thing they want to do into the community, and the community doesn't really want it. But at least as far as I could tell from the interviewees, those people were often putting themselves in a lower position in relation to the community. So they were feeling like, okay, I am the outsider, so I have to listen to the community, and even if the people in the and if I don't agree with the people in the community, then I'm the one who should take a step back somehow. So there is. I could sense a sort of respect towards the community, which maybe it's also something that's embedded in the Japanese culture as a whole. So maybe this system would not work as well as it does in maybe other cultural contexts. So, and that's a big question that I have, because it's a very interesting initiative, and one of my main questions is, would it work in other countries, in other contexts, and if yes, how can we make it work, or if no, how can we make it suit that context? But yeah, that's definitely a lot to unpack here.
Okay, we are out of time. Last question, please. Wally, ask a question.
Thanks, Simona. It was such an interesting presentation, especially for some of us who were in Lausanne yesterday, and we saw some of the projects and the communities. You have actually answered a question that you mentioned in your presentation that over 60% or about 60% of these people who go to the communities end up staying long term. And you mentioned a time frame between 1 and 3 years. Is that so? Is that what the program is?
So the program itself has a maximum of 3 years.
So that's like good support from the municipality or the government?
Yeah, so in these 3 years you will get a salary, you will get a house for free, and you get also some kind of funding to do the project you want to do in the community.
So they were supporting you to get started. Now, have you interviewed any of the people, the 40%, who belong in the 40% category? And what are some interesting insights you could share other than the obvious reasons why people don't end up staying? Because we know the dream is a dream, and you go to your utopia and it doesn't work out because nothing can beat the utopia. But what are some of the other hidden, perhaps, factors that make these people living?
So I didn't interview these for any of these 40%, also because they're usually not there, so they're hard to find, right? But I got some like secondhand stories from like the people who are still there and who were telling me, okay, that person left because this and that. And there are usually a lot of reasons, but I now if I can't remember the actual quote, but I asked one of these Chikyoko Shikirikutai people about what do you think would be people who are suitable for this kind of job. And she was saying like it cannot be people who have this idea of living this idyllic life in the countryside, just doing whatever they want and relaxing. So and this kind of people often end up being a mismatch for this program, and they end up leaving, because actually, especially in Japanese community, when you enter the community, then you have a lot of responsibility. Like you have to attend and help with local events, with local things like, you know, cleaning the side of the streets. So you have all this, you have to be engaged in the community in a sense, otherwise you're really kind of the outcast. And people sometimes don't like this, they don't like to have to be part of the community. So, and these people are often the ones who end up leaving. Then there are other reasons that are more problematic, like, so this program actually is attracting a lot of young women, and some of them experience issues like as harassment or stalking. So there was one case that I was told about of one young woman that left because she had a stalker, and the local government was not doing anything to help her, so she ended up leaving. So there are different cases, but yeah.
So already very interesting things here. Women first, it's a whole area of research, you know, like women just to go to remote areas. And we met yesterday one such woman, a policewoman from Tokyo.
Yes.
And she is now running for the local politics. We're talking about really deep immersion into the community despite the challenges. So it's a fascinating piece of research and also a fascinating program to see how that can be recontextualized in our cases. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.